It's an honor to be able to introduce him because if you follow news and media, and I'm not talking about the news and media that we see on Netflix in terms of Bridgerton. I'm not talking about Lady Whistledown. I'm talking about somebody who's actually created much more than Bridgerton and just Netflix. If you've heard of IPNlive.com, have you heard of IBN? No. Money Control? Yeah. First Post? Cricket Next, perhaps. Home Shop? But I'm sure you must have heard of this channel called Colors. Big Boss? NBC TV18, CNN, IBN7, MTV, CNBC, and definitely you've heard of Book My Show, Forbes India. He's the founder of the TV18 group and now the founder of Quint, which I'm sure many of you follow. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it gives me lots of pleasure and a privilege to be able to welcome none other than Raghav Bahl.
I liked it when you said colors, you got the maximum response.
Firstly, thank you for doing this. Very kind of you.
It's a pleasure.
At the very outset, let me ask you something that's outside syllabus. How does it feel to be back to school?
Always is lovely. I think the most memorable things that you carry in life are your school memories. Because I think for what? 12, 13 years, you're just packed into the same environment and you share every day with the same pack of people. So I think those are the most deeply etched memories that you carry in life.
And the other deeply etched memories that we carry in life is what we consume in terms of television or in terms of media. You are responsible for the fourth pillar of democracy in many a way, but consumption patterns have changed. And just by a show of hands, how many of us watch TV? How many of us watch OTT? And how many of us consume news on Instagram? So, there are...
Your first question, when you said TV, did you say, maybe get a sense of what is news on TV?
Yes, perhaps news on TV. How many of us watch news on TV?
Okay, pretty much the same.
Yes. They're the ones who are the intelligent cohort. But my question to you is that every generation has a different choice of consuming information. We saw as many hands up for social media as much as for television. Of course, television is not dying, as is evident, but at the same point in time, social media is also caught up. What is your message to those people who want to join the media industry 10 years from now? What would be your message to them?
So when you say media industry, this is a sort of a broad brush because media has clearly two parts to it. One is news and information, and the other bit is entertainment, and they're two very different animals. So you'll have to take the answer of both separately. Because entertainment is a different field altogether, news is very different, they are lumped together as media. So I'll pick up on news. I guess your question was more on news. News, because entertainment is film, OTT, feature format, very different kind of vocation altogether. So in news, today, we are in a situation where almost entirely it's being consumed on a mobile device. I hesitate to say digital because I find that the distinction between digital and non-digital as completely superfluous in today's world. Everything is digital. The more important distinction is it mobile or is it static? Are we consuming it on a mobile platform or are we sitting at home or in a cinema hall and consuming it on a static screen? Because everything is digital. I mean, even the cinema that you watch, it's a digital film that is being produced. It's no longer that old, film with chemicals in it. So my understanding of, or my experience tells me that all news and information will get consumed on a handheld mobile device, obviously in the digital format. Large format entertainment and sports are possibly two of the only things which will be continue to be consumed on a static screen, either on a big cinema screen or the television at your home, but that's static, it's wall mounted. And that's also changing. A lot of people, we all watch a lot of OTT today on iPads, right? I mean, that's as mobile as news. But so entertainment format will be will be split between a mobile device and a static device. News and information entirely on a mobile device. The second bit that you asked, so that's the one big change. In my generation, when I was, as old as you guys, we used to read the newspaper or listen to Doordarshan News in the evening. Both were static devices. Both were not digital at all. The third element that's come into this world is social media. And that is a very dramatic disruption of the way news and information has been produced and consumed. Because social media is something that is so democratic, it's overly democratic. And it is any one of you can today become a broadcast journalist. Because you can just, if you happen to be very good in one subject, you can therefore launch your own Insta feed, you can launch your own Twitter stream, you can launch your own YouTube channel. And since you are good at that subject, what you say would probably have more relevance than what a generalist would say. So social media has come and opened up the entire gamut of information, not so much news. I think that distinction needs to be made. Information has today become completely decentralized. Because if today I am a journalist who's writing on, let's say, the American elections, right? I will be bringing my understanding that will be gleaned from my own experience, my readings, etc. But if there is a professor of US politics at Harvard, his depth of knowledge of the US presidential elections is much more than mine. And in today's world, he has as much access to broadcasting his views as I have. So I think that has changed, because now it's become, through social media, a very democratic exercise. And therefore, as a journalist, you need to up your game, or be very alive to the fact that there will be interactions with your content, and you need to be open. So what used to happen, and I'll finish my answer with this one. What used to happen in my time, when we started in the world of journalism, that's early 90s, there was no social media, there was no digital. I mean, these kids won't even know a world without Instagram, but it was a world without Instagram. And what we used to have was what I call now the voice of God journalism. That is the voice of God, right? 7, 8 big editors got into a room and they said, all right, what's the big story for today? Oh, it's the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, it's this. So they'll line up about 8, 9 stories and say, this is it. That's not the game at all today. I may want to be the voice of God, I can't, because if I put out the 8 stories and the world at large is not interested in those, that's the end of my story. So I think the whole game, because of the fact that it's interactive, because of the fact that it's a lot of experts get into it, and one factor we didn't touch, but I'm sure you'll be touching it in the later, is the whole arena of misinformation and propaganda and lies, which social media is the bad part of social media.
Which is exactly what I was going to ask you, saying that you spoke about sifting between facts and fiction. The problem, the biggest gremlin that we face, and me included, is that
Me included. Absolutely.
There's so much of information. You've got a WhatsApp university, you've got a Meta university, you've got so many universities, and then you've already got your Harvards and Yales and Oxfords. Everybody's giving information. We're consuming that information. How is one to determine, and how are we to determine what is actually true vis-a-vis what is just an interpretation of events that have taken place?
So this is an existential crisis. I don't think we've found the answer because the crisis is so new. The crisis is maybe a decade old, maybe 15 years on the outside. Mobile phones and iPhones and Facebook all became relevant around 2007, 2008. So it's a 15-year-old phenomenon, has been accelerating. But I think it's an existential crisis because the amount of misinformation, the amount of propaganda, the amount of lies that are being peddled today via social media, it is, I do not exaggerate, an existential crisis. If we don't, as civilization, as a thinking civilization, as an educated civilization, if we don't have a solution to this existential crisis, then it's a real monstrosity. Having said that, I think human beings have an innate wisdom about them. Collective human beings also have an innate wisdom about them. We can be misled for a little while. All of us can be. But I don't think as a cohort we can always be misled. That's number one. Number two, there are professionals and people and committed, honest, professionals in this world who will always back for the truth. And therefore you start developing trust and respect in those people, including brands. When I say people, I mean brands. And as an intelligent cohort, we will gravitate towards that platform. There will be some fringe elements who will continue to want to live in their echo chambers and they continue to want to listen to what they believe is their version of the truth. But the fact is, the truth is the truth. It has very few versions. And therefore, the challenge for the entire media community, in fact, the challenge for human society and civilization, is to create more and more platforms, create more and more mechanisms, create more and more technologies, which then take the propaganda and the lies out of the truth. As trust builds around truthful brands, you will find that more and more intelligent people, discerning people, rational people, will take their cues from that platform. You can see it today also, right? I mean, you still believe and trust much more in some of the bigger brands of news, some of the more trustworthy individuals on YouTube or on other channels. The people who peddle absolutely outlandish lies, they have their following. I'm not saying they don't have their followings, but I think they do get discovered. It's a painful process. It's a dangerous process. But if you believe in the wisdom of human beings, then I think you will find an answer. And I believe also technology. I believe technologies are evolving, and with AI you have such rapid search and such deep search and such intelligent search that I think you should be able to reach a point in the next few years where anything that is posted goes through a very, very quick nanosecond AI search check. And only if it passes a certain threshold does it get posted. I'm sure we will hit that.
It'll be fantastic.
I think we will. We're already, not quite there.
But we will reach there.
We will reach there. I'm quite confident.
And is Quint taking steps in that regard, or?
See, Quint is a content platform, not so much a technology platform. But we also have a technology platform, which is a media publishing platform. It's a SaaS-based digital publishing operation. There we have started introducing a lot of AI. Yet not in search, because I think that's a deeper, more, rigorous kind of exercise. And that will probably have to come from the Googles and the Microsofts and the Facebooks. Meta, for instance, is doing a lot of fact check stuff. So we do a lot of fact check for Meta as well. I think the technology will have to come from one of these big guys, or maybe all of them. And they're all working on it, right? They're all working on AI-generated search.
But sir, you spoke about something very interesting. You spoke about the fact that there are echo chambers, and then the vast majority gravitate towards truth. But sir, what a lot of people feel, and this is something that was very evident in the shooting of Donald Trump, and which was very unfortunate. There was a young, as everybody would know, as a young 20-year-old who was responsible for it. The polarization, the growing echo chambers, and the sizable audience that this echo chamber now has, it's only multiplying, and they are acting radically. In India also, many believe that the extreme left or the extreme right, and that there are journalistic viewpoints that somebody like what people would believe, like a Karan Thapar being on the extreme left and an Arnab Goswami being on the extreme right, they have their own set of following. But sometimes that following is not something that necessarily one would advocate, because sometimes it's far away from the truth, is what I have, at least in my own myopic understanding, understood. To that end, media, of course, undeniably, is a reflection of society. But society is also a reflection of what media will show. Therefore, my question to you is that what is your take on journalistic integrity and the fact that the fourth pillar of democracy is, according to many, more divided and fragmented than ever?
No question. When I said existential crisis, that's what I meant. You have actually dilated on that very intelligently and very comprehensively. So yes, there is. There is a crisis here because centrists like us who do not want to give outlandish opinions of the left or outlandish opinions of the right do find that our tweets are retweeted less. We don't make as much of an impact because we try to be rational and we try to be correct. And therefore we don't appeal to either echo chamber. And therefore I hope we appeal to much more of the mainstream, the silent mainstream. Mainstreams tend to be silent, echo chambers tend to be loud. So my conviction as someone who spent 40 years doing this is that the mainstream, the silent person, will eventually assert himself or herself. We saw that in our own elections just 6 weeks back. Very surprising result brought about by a silent majority, which never made itself heard. But when it came to counting day, went and voted. So the question that you put to me about ideological left and right, I'll pick up the two examples that you gave, Karan and Arnab. Now, in my worldview or my understanding, Karan has an ideological orientation. Every one of us has an ideological orientation. You cannot be a thinking, living human being unless you have an ideological orientation. Some of us believe in one set of ethics and values, some of us believe in another set of ethics and values, and there's nothing right or wrong about that. The important thing is, when my profession comes into play, do I let my ideological orientation color my professional duty? Whether I'm a journalist, whether I'm a lawyer, whether I'm a doctor, will a doctor say that I am ideologically a right-wing person, therefore I will not treat someone who's come to me, someone who's injured, who's come to me? If he's a good doctor, he won't do that. So ideological orientation, all of us have in mind. Our professional duties are supposed to be separated from our ideological. So when you talk about Karan, who I know very well and I have great respect for, he may have an ideological orientation, but as a journalist, when he questions, he will question a Rahul Gandhi with the same ferocity with which he'll question a Narendra Modi. He will put the same sort of challenging questions to both of them. Because then he's doing his duty as a good journalist. And a good journalist's quest is always the quest for the right thing, quest for the truth. Some of the other people, and I don't wish to name anyone because that's not fair, they're not here. But some of the other people who belong to our profession, I would say belonged to our profession. Because I don't think what they are doing today is journalism. They may be sitting on television channels. They may be sitting on journalistic platforms. But the kind of content they are putting out is not journalism, it's propaganda. And therefore I would not even call them journalists. Because they have defied and denied and abrogated the core principles of journalism, which is that when I'm reporting news, I report nothing but the truth as I try and discover. When I'm on an opinion show, when I'm writing an editorial, I am absolutely free to put my ideological views through. But some of these propagandists, who, as I said, I don't call them journalists, they are on a journalistic platform, unfortunately, they purvey their opinion as news. That, I believe, is blasphemous. You will not see a Karan doing it. He will not purvey news as opinion. Opinion he will purvey as opinion, which is fine. That is opinion. And I think some of the biggest and most credible news organizations in the world, whichever one you want to pick up, whether you want to pick up the Hindu in India, or the Indian Express in India, or you want to pick up the New York Times, you want to pick up BBC, all of these journals will have a very clear distinction between news and opinion. On opinion pages, they can put out their ideological slant. New York Times is pro-democratic party, fine, as long as it's on the opinion pages. Fox News is pro-Trump, fine. But it's when they start mixing the two, is when you start denying your journalism. So my answer to your thing is, you may be ideologically left, but as long as when it comes to the profession of journalism, you're practicing on the principles of journalism, that's fine.
But sir, you've beautifully articulated it, the answer, when it comes to the thought that you express that journalistic integrity is yet maintained by few, and yet they continue to uphold it. So my question then is, again slightly outside, is the idea when we see a news outlet, and now, like you mentioned, the New York Times, and of course America is facing a conundrum of whom to elect with both Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
It's an existential crisis of their own right now.
Absolutely, and to that end, when one opens the New York Times today, in comparison to 15 years ago, and the same with CNN or with BBC and global news agencies of high repute and standard, and then compares the same in India, whether it be the Buyer or the Swarajya. The Buyer may have more journalistic integrity according to one, and Swarajya may have journalistic integrity according to somebody else. So my question is, when I'm 16, I'm 15, if I'm going to watch on Instagram the Buyer, for example, my algorithm is going to pick up the Buyer. I'm going to get news one after the other that is going to be similar to Wire. My views will then become my thoughts, and those thoughts will essentially become the action that I do. Is this fair for young people that when they open a media outlet, which is the New York Times, again just to take it back to the global context, that they are fed with only one set of information? When I had the good fortune, when I used to watch Devil's Advocate, and I've seen IBN, and at that juncture, we used to get a vast ranging views, because there used to be people also who used to come on those platforms. Now, as you would see, sir, a lot of the right-wing politicians in our country don't go to some of the platforms, and likewise for the other side.
Yeah.
So the idea being that then we become consumers of specific news, and therefore we become oriented towards one over the other without actually getting a choice in terms of what is right and what to choose. What are your thoughts on this?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And digital technology, as well as search algorithms, as well as all these platforms, they're absolutely echo chamber inducing. You're absolutely right. That's a shame. And therefore the onus becomes on you. The onus is on all of you to go and ensure that you get a far more balanced viewpoint from some of these other outlets. I'm afraid you're absolutely right that technology is not helping you. Technology is not helping. Technology is making worse. Unless someone comes up with an algorithm which says, all right, if you have consumed so much of this, then I must ensure that you get at least another 50% of that. And I hope some of these big tech companies do that. That's a very good thought, actually, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. What happens is echo chambers. And I think therefore the onus is on us. Onus is on you, all of you as intelligent human beings, to know that this is just one propagandist ideological version. I cannot become a prisoner of this, because if I become a prisoner of this, then I'm getting brainwashed. Therefore, you have to make a conscious effort to go out and look at the other side of what these propagandists are telling you. And there are newspapers and there are websites, including the Quint, including we are called left, but we are not left at all. I mean, I'm the biggest supporter of free market capitalism and could be. But free market capitalism is not oligarchic crony capitalism. Free market capitalism is actually competitive capitalism. So I think it's onus is on you. Go for publications like Indian Express. I still find that one of the most balanced newspapers in India, where you get both sides, absolutely both sides of the coin. That's the one I read.
And so also the Hindu, perhaps.
Hindu, yes.
Hindu, yes.
Absolutely.
But again, what you mentioned is what some would believe is an egalitarian utopian concept where one can decipher and one can understand. So what you also, because the reason why I call it egalitarian utopian for a 15-year-old is because the 15-year-olds who are in front of us are of course the smartest perhaps from their institutions, but the average 15-year-old, average 18-year-old, lest I say the average 40, 50, 60-year-old will not have the academic wherewithal and understanding in order to be able to say that, this is misinformation. And if I were to give an example in my immediate family, where my uncle believes that there is a voice of God, and if there is a voice of God, one must follow ABC and whatever the voice of God says. It's difficult to argue when you don't have white hair with men who have grey hair. And therefore, my question to you again, I'm sorry to press on this, is when a 15-year-old who is intelligible, who has made their opinions basis understanding different issues, talks to a person who's very learned, but understands things from the voice of God, how does a 15-year-old convince that person, saying that there is some sense in what they're saying? And this I ask in the larger context, because I.I.M.U.N as an organization, which Abhishek may have told you, is run by 15 to 22-year-olds. Yeah. So we have to deal with old wise people and sometimes old very wise people. So how would you explain this to a 15-year-old who's working in the organization?
Again, the only way to do it is to forever in the quest of a balanced viewpoint. Be aware that some of the most outdated you get on WhatsApp or on some of these other echo platforms certainly need to be fact-checked. And this is your own wisdom and intelligence comes into play. Because if you want to get brainwashed, and human history has shown it over and over again, you will get brainwashed. And then that has its own repercussions. Because when a cult is formed, then come the abuses. And abuses lead to further abuses, because not corrupt more than absolute power, right? And then there is a pushback. And then there is reform and correction. We've seen it over and over again in human history. But the point is, people who are trapped in those 10, 15 years before the abuses and excesses can be taken out, they go through a very, very painful period. But there is no perfect world. This will not happen as you and I may want perfectly. There will be many of us who will get brainwashed. There will be many of us who will resist getting brainwashed. There will be many of us who will make the effort to go and find the alternate. And the ones who get brainwashed, as I said, actually come into their senses only when they come face to face with the abuse. And that's inevitable. I'm not saying it for now, but I'm saying look at human
course of history.
Human history, yes.
What Goebbels did, what happened to Germany, and then what eventually happened. But
that's right. I mean, if you guys if you haven't seen it, I would actively encourage you to go and see a series on OTT, The Evil Empire, Hitler.
Which is the Circle of Evil?
Yes.
The Circle of Evil, yes.
Yeah. You please see it as young students. You must see it to see what happened in Germany then. It's a 7-part or 6-part series.
Yes.
Brilliantly done. And your understanding of the world will improve dramatically.
I'm glad you touched upon the subject. And today we live in a day and age where, taking you to another subject, in a day and age where we have narcissistic leadership across walks of life, where the strongman image is what one confirms as a leader. That the person who's shouting the most and who is the most vocal is essentially the leader of the pack. When quite essentially, the idea of India that I understand is in the Indus Valley civilization, there was no strongman leader. The fact that India has been an inclusive society where live and let live should have been and is very much what I would like to believe the order of the day, and that strong leaders necessarily don't need to be very narcissistic and megalomaniac. What is your take on leadership for young people who see that the person who screams the loudest in a debate competition, and this happens, long gone are the times where essentially the moderators of the debate also say that, we'll grade you on finesse and diplomacy. Now it's more about who can vociferously put your point across. So what would you say to a generation who wants to become leaders, who will inevitably become leaders? And I've seen from the organization some who've joined parliaments, who've joined offices of prominence. Once they were in the organization, they have been nicer and kinder. And as they've joined mainstream, it's become that they've become more vocal. And when I ask them the same question, they say, Rishabh, you don't understand the difficulty of politics. But as a man who's traversed all fields and spoken to so very many people, what would be your definition of leadership for them, for the coming generation, the leaders of tomorrow?
So I think you made one very important point very articulately, and that is that yes, in today's amplification age, digital amplification age, what you say and the force with which you say it, and the number of times you repeat it, and then the number of times you amplify it, does make you appear to be a stronger leader, bigger leader, more convincing leader. You're a prisoner of your time. We were having a graphic discussion once, that perhaps the most powerful and successful political leader of the 20th century, someone like FDR, Roosevelt, who did 3 terms in America through the Second World War. In today's age of television and social media, he would not have been elected. He was wheelchair bound. And can you imagine in today's world, a wheelchair bound leader being able to sway the masses? Because on the other hand are the charismatic guys, the guys who talk a lot, and the guys who say all the good things. And here's a wheelchair bound guy. And he was the most successful leader America's ever seen. So yes, the rules of the game have changed. It's no longer about your ability to be in substance a good leader. It's now much more also a question of how you project, how forcefully you project. Having said that, I think there is also a self-corrective mechanism that does come into play. A Bolsonaro lost in Brazil. There are several examples of leaders who tried to project a strong man, I am only the right person, fall in love with me, follow me, whatever I tell you do. There are instances of those leaders losing. It takes a while. I agree with you. It takes a while because they need to be discovered. So qualities of leadership in today's day and age, of course, projection and communication are important. But I continue to believe that there are more fundamental qualities that will survive the test of time. One is, to me, the most important facet of a leader is how he or she acts and responds during adversity. Because it's adversity that brings out leadership skills. Good times, all of us can write. All of us can write the good times. It's when something wrong and bad happens, some problem or crisis erupts, how do you handle it? So the most important quality in my mind is for a leader is how he or she handles adversity. Can they be calm? Can they not try and wish it away but face it squarely? Can they not try and cover it with distractions so that people start thinking of other things? Can they look the country squarely in the eye and say, yes, we have a problem, and this is how I intend to deal with it. So how you deal with adversity is, to me, the most important quality of a leader. Are you going to wish it away, distract it away, shout it away, or are you going to deal with it transparently and honestly? The other ability is the ability to respect the team that is with you. Any leader who survives over a long period of time is a leader who necessarily carries a team with him, who necessarily accommodates dissent, who necessarily respects people around him, doesn't put them down. So I think it's very important how you respect and empower a team. In the short run, dictators have always negated everything that I've said and have ruled. But can you imagine, I think Mahatma Gandhi said it, and I think it was a very powerful statement from one of the wisest men that this world has ever seen, civilization has ever seen. He said, do you know, look at any period of human history. Anyone who has been a dictator and cruel and vindictive and violent has inevitably, and he said it, and he added a word. He says, can you imagine, inevitably, always come to grief and a bad end. So, I mean, I look at the wisdom of that. He said, there is not one example in human history of someone who was cruel, vindictive, bad, violent. At a point in time, he or she looks invincible. Gosh, we can't get rid of this guy. But human history has shown you, and he said it, I'm not paraphrasing his quote because I don't remember the example, but he said, can you imagine every time that person has come to grief? And you pick up any example in this world, any.
And in that context, when we spoke about leadership, and when we speak about leadership at that juncture, choosing role models is a direct byproduct, because strong leaders make for great role models for everyone. But the definition of strong leadership is, of course, very different, like you've just elucidated. Today's generation grows up at a very different time. You have Alcaraz beating Novak. You've got a T20 version of the game taking over the Test cricket. I was a fan of Rahul Dravid, but Rahul Dravid wouldn't make the T20 team for sure.
Well, I was a big fan in my time, Sunil Gavaskar. He wouldn't make it to the T20 team.
And both these gentlemen left the ball outside the off stump. Today, it is the day and age of going way outside. I'm using a cricketing analogy because cricketing aficionado. So they go way outside the off stump. They take the ball from there and then scoop it over, find leg and hit a six. The idea that we live in a day and age where there is a changing definition of role models, where definitely role models that come through are ones that are liked more on Instagram. The number of likes dictate it as well. And it is a swashbuckling approach that many take. How should a young person choose a role model? Have you had a role model in your life? And what have you learned from this role model?
I think, again, role models are important in anyone's life because, we are thinking people. And I quite agree with you that in today's day and age, with the kind of media amplification that happens 24/7, people who are able to project and communicate are people who will get, and there's nothing wrong with that. They are a product of their times. In my time, if there was no social media, I didn't need to be filming myself all the time and putting myself out there all the time. But today you need to do that. So you're a product of your time, no quarrel with that. But I think ultimately the qualities stay the same. Your ability to inspire trust, your credibility, your ability to respect people, your ability to be fair, your ability to be a nice guy. Frankly, nice guys do have bigger following. A Dhoni will have a bigger following. A Rahul Dravid, in his own time, had a huge following.
Roger Federer.
Federer, absolutely. So nice guys will have it. You will find the ones who bitch and the ones who use crude language. They will get their following. They will obviously get their following. But the nicer guys will get bigger following. So I don't think that rule of the game has changed. The way you do it has changed because you're a product of your time. I mean, as for my, since you had sent me this question that you would ask, I was thinking, I said, obviously you have so many role models in life, but who is the one that I think who in my understanding, as an Indian growing up just a few decades after independence, not today's India. The India that you live in today is very, very different from the India that I was born in. Much poorer, much more illiterate, much less powerful, much more dependent on the world. We couldn't even have our own produce enough wheat to feed our people. Today you've got granaries full. You are the world's largest wheat exporter. So there is a big difference that's happened in 75 years. But the one person that I think deserves a lot of credit for where India is today, and I think very few people in this hall will agree with me, because that person has been so vilified on WhatsApp. I think Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, because I saw the power of what he did for this country. When we became free in and he's the most vilified character today on WhatsApp. Most vilified. Some all kinds of lies are written about the man. But when India became free, there were such high chances that we would have gone the way of a Pakistan, or we would have gone the way of so many African countries. We would have become a dictatorship. We would have become a cult following country, because we were so poor. We were so remarkably poor. We were so remarkably illiterate. Our average lifespan in 1947 was in the 30s. Today our average lifespan is well into the 70s. But Indians would live only in their 30s. That's how. That's the kind of country that was inherited by the leaders of that time. At that time, to think of making yourself into a constitutional democracy, at that time, to give the right to vote to anybody, it didn't exist in the world. India gave the right to vote to women before America gave the right to vote to women. So people of that generation who took those calls in the 1940s, late 40s and early 50s were remarkable, and Nehru was the leader. So you have to give the collective, if collective credit has to be given to one person, it has to be given to the leader. The ability to set up IITs, the ability to set up a space program, the ability to set up the nuclear program. I can go on and on. The fact that we survived as a liberal constitutional democracy, and believe me, that is underlying most of the growth and pride that today all of us feel in India. That underlying pride comes from the decisions taken in the 1950s and 60s. We so easily could have become another version of Pakistan with, religious strife, sectarianism, majoritarian politics. That was one man who negated all of this. He believed in parliamentary democracy. He believed in accommodating dissent. He believed in, creating a liberal constitutional democracy. And therefore, in my mind, since I lived through some of those times, I would say that what India has become today owes a lot to what happened in the 50s, 60s, where a lot could have gone wrong, which we don't realize. Absolutely. We are enjoying the fruits of what happened right then. If what happened right then had actually happened wrong, as happened in several countries, including neighbor Pakistan, African countries, you and I would not have been sitting here as proud Indians, as a country which is on the cusp of breaking through so many barriers and coming through as literally a miracle of the world. I mean, in 50s, 60s, when we became free, nobody believed that India would survive. Nobody. And the fact that today we have as one country and where we are, I think a lot of the credit goes in that age to that man. So if I had to pick an icon, I would pick him.
Very well said. But, you mentioned about Pandit Nehru, and there's no question that at the stroke of the midnight hour, the opportunity lay with the government back then to become a Pakistan or some of the African nations, or to keep us as a strong secular nation. There's much to learn from Pandit Nehru, and as a centrist, I would also add, there's perhaps a lot to learn from Prime Minister Modi.
Of course, lots of good things.
And in that context, I wanted to ask you this, that both Pandit Nehru and Prime Minister Modi and all the leaders that we've had in our country, all of them have had some of the other story, majority of them, have had some of the other story about how school has impacted them. My question to you, what role did your school play in the Raghav Bahl that we see today?
Well, all of us form ourselves in our school, right?
Yes. Well, on a lighter note, before you answer that, were you the teacher's pet, or were you the backbencher who made a lot of fun?
No. I would come to the front benches only as a punishment. Otherwise, absolutely always throughout 12 plus 5 years of graduation and postgrad, 17 years, always a backbencher. Always would go to the last seat. School was fun. Honestly, school was great fun. Since you know how it happens in school, there are some guys who become the sort of ringleaders and cheerleaders. So I must admit that I was one of those. Very rarely found in class. Almost always either caught up in some debate or elocution or drama practice or football field or almost always out of the class. But managed to get good grades so the teachers wouldn't frown on that.
So you were truly an outstanding student.
No, there were lots of us like that. Lots of us. But the teachers were, as long as you got the grade, the teachers were happy. So it didn't matter. But I think I realized one thing in school that for me became a fundamental, since your question was what happened that was sort of at the core of what you became or did not become in life. I had a turning point moment in school when, because as I said, I was one of these guys who was always, and we were in an all-boys school, so you could afford to be a little bit more aggressive and in your face than you would if it was a co-ed. Then you need to be a little bit more civilized. But if you're an all-boys school, then you can be a bit more in the face. So I was that kind of a guy who was trying to be very popular and trying to do lots of things. So I got elected the school president, and I thought I would love it because that was right in my sort of scheme of things. But I realized a thing about my own personality at that point in time. I didn't enjoy that. I didn't enjoy being accountable so much to activities which were not directly in my control. I don't know whether I'm making sense. But that I was made to do so many things that I didn't want to do myself. By virtue of the fact that you're school president, you got to speak here, speak there, you got to be at some places, join the principal here. I realized that was one important revelation I realized about myself. That I'm actually happy in a situation where I can control my time and what I do with my activities. And I think that's the day I realized that I want to be an entrepreneur. And I would rather not be a public figure, a politician or a IAS officer, because those guys are not in control of their own time. An entrepreneur is in control of his time or her time.
Very true. And an entrepreneur can remain behind the curtain and yet manage to do very many things, which sometimes when you're in front of the curtain, it becomes much more difficult to achieve and accomplish.
Yeah, just the ability to be in control of your time. I don't know whether I'm being able to say that with that much. It's so important. To me, it was. I realized to me it was very important.
For all of you, I'm just going to take it into a Gen Z context. All of you have seen Never Have I Ever, have you? So reminds me of a younger sir would remind me of somebody like Paxton more and Devi Vishwakumar less. Yeah, perhaps. But I don't know to an extent. I just trying to extrapolate it to today's day and age. But the idea that what you mentioned about being somebody who was participating in debates and participating in things that were extracurricular, now part of curriculum in a way, I'm sure that shaped you in many ways.
Absolutely. And learned much more from those things, honestly. Yeah.
Right. And to that end brings me to my last question, that when you are an outstanding student and when you're not Hermione Granger and you're not topping class, the issue is that one has to deal with adversity both academically, and I'm sure you must have faced a lot of adversity in life, because the most successful people, and I've noticed this, and we try to focus on adversity more than success, would say that they faced more failures and less success. So is this the same case with you, and could you narrate any adversity, and how can young people, just to put this into context, how can young people deal with adversity given the fact that Gen Z, for all of its many accolades which they should rightly get and deserve, they seem to be a little more fragile when it comes to dealing with adversity?
You know, yeah, I mean, I said, listen, I also have kids who've gone through through that cycle not too far back. Yeah, the fragility bit, I quite agree with you, and I think so many of kids at that age are prisoners of their social media cocoon. Something we never were. Didn't matter to us what someone is saying about me or someone. Didn't matter. But I see how much it matters to people of my kids' age, or younger people like you. They are so concerned about stray comments that are coming on Instagram, or believe me, in our time that just was not a concern. There was no Instagram, nothing. So you could call me a scoundrel. I couldn't care whether you called me a scoundrel or you did. But today, the fragility, to me, a lot of the fragility comes from being so sensitive to what the world around them is saying. Because what the world around them is saying, their world, not the general world, their own world of friends and detractors, people who are trying to put them down, it's coming at them 24/7. You may put out a photograph and then someone make fun of it or mock you for it, and then you lose. For 2 hours you lost it, and for 2 hours you are a very unhappy person. So I think a lot of the fragility comes from there. To I know it's very difficult to practice it in the environment that you guys are in, but believe me, your own image of yourself is the most important thing that you carry. What others think of you, if you can find something intelligent in what they've told you, please pick it up. Otherwise, please ignore. Please have the confidence in yourself that you have made the right judgments. Mistakes is very different from making the right judgment. Mistakes, as you raised it, and failures, according to me, are the most important things in life. Successes are the occasional things that happen. Failures and mistakes are your biggest companion through your life's journey. And it's that bit about the adversity that I say. Your ability to handle adversity, your ability to learn from genuine mistakes, your ability to make a judgment, and as long as you make the judgment with your best and most honest intention, and if that judgment were to go wrong, that will give you such learnings that next time you'll make a better judgment. So mistakes and failures are fantastic, because that's the only way you really learn your way through life. What others do, and especially in young age, we tend to be a little bit more vicious. As you grow older, you tend to give up some of that and tend to live more and more within your own confines. But please don't let that trouble you as much as it troubles you, or as I've seen young people getting troubled. Your own confidence in your own ability, your own very rational understanding of your constraints and your strengths. If you have a rational understanding of your strengths and your constraints, you will grow up to be a very, very strong, balanced human being.
Again, very rightly put what you just mentioned, but also as adolescents, with the prefrontal cortex developing at that age, the idea that you just mentioned, that to be a little more rational and to think things through, because of nothing else but the fact that there are more hormones shooting to the brain, and the amygdala is getting all sorts of hormones. The idea that how to sift through that seamlessly and yet mindfully is something that one yet grapples with.
Absolutely.
And the ability to acknowledge that there is more failure that one is going to get and less success, I think is a starting step. Am I correct in understanding
absolutely. No, absolutely.
When you don't get good marks in mathematics, there's no problem. Like in my case, there were more zeros and less ones. But the idea that you take the maths paper and don't show it to your parents may be a greater problem rather than,
squaring up to it.
Yeah.
Squaring up to it.
So, I mean, that is something. That is.
No, because you will, listen, you guys have just started your life. You've got several decades ahead of you. Please believe me when I say, this is not a perfunctory statement. You will have to deal more with failure than with success. Successes are far less frequent than failures. But successes happen when you deal with your failures. I think that's terribly important.
Super. So I'm going to end with a short rapid fire that I've borrowed from a popular television host who's been kind enough to spend a lot of time at I.I.M.U.N and therefore has had a profound impact on me and the organization. At the end of which we promise to give you a hamper.
Okay.
Not as big as the one that he gives on TV.
Okay.
But a hamper nonetheless. When I say the following words, what's the first word that comes to your mind? When I say TV18's IPO.
It's overhyped.
Overhyped. So we should not.
It was overhyped. It was way beyond. I mean, nothing. You don't feel good because the only way it could have gone was down from there. So there's no point opening at 200 times your earnings because it'll come down. It'll gravitate down to a more level.
The Quint.
It's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge because the digital content world is tough, and to be fair and honest in journalism today is very, very tough.
Fake news.
Biggest danger for civilization.
A book you would recommend to everyone to read?
Okay, more from this cohort. So more from the cohort. At about your age or maybe slightly older, I read a fabulous book called Freedom at Midnight. It's written by Larry Collins and Dominic Lapierre. I would honestly suggest every young person should read that to get a very good understanding of what happened in India in the 1940s and 50s. It's written beautifully. It's written like a racy novel, so you won't get bored.
When I say youth, what's the first word or thought that comes to your mind?
It's clearly the hope for the future.
When I say India, that is Bharat, what is the thought that comes?
Oh, great pride. Absolutely great pride. We talked about at length of what we've achieved in 75 years.
And your answer on the last one will determine the size of the hamper.
Okay. All right.
Is when I say the organization, this is your first time at I.I.M.U.N. What's the first thought that comes to mind when I say India's international movements to United Nations or I.I.M.U.N?
Really more power to you guys. What you do is so productive.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.